It is my great pleasure, in fact, to introduce to you my colleague Carmen Aitken, who is a senior research manager and has had the awesome responsibility of bringing this research together. Carmen's going to skip through all the main findings, and I'm sure later on we'll all have an opportunity to discuss with the others the findings. So can I introduce Carmen?
As Robin just said, I am going to skip through the findings because there's obviously quite a lot of research that we've done in this area in social networking and in media literacy. We have published a report, the full report on this, which covers both our qualitative and quantitative research. So if you look at our website, you can get the full report, and obviously there'll be a lot more detail in it than the headlines I'm going to go through today. Okay, as Robin just pointed out about our statutory obligation with media literacy, we've also done this research because it forms part of our ongoing research into media literacy and the need for us to be evidence-based in the decisions that we're making, and also helping us to define our future priorities. Some of this research has also been conducted to support our submission for the Byron Review, as well as our overall media literacy research. The specific objectives of this research have been to put social networking sites in the wider context of media literacy, and also to provide a profile of people's use of social networking sites. We won't be going into that as much today, but I will be drawing attention to it. It's also to understand people's use of them and to investigate concerns about privacy and safety, which we've all seen a lot in the press, academic research, and also from corporates as well, bringing attention to it. The research that we're sort of headlining today, as I said, is both qualitative and quantitative, and I will be calling out whether it's based on qual or quant, but if you see numbers, it'll be quant, and if you don't, it'll be qual. Sorry, it's a bit touchy. Just to put it in context, you know, social networking, we've all seen it in the press, it's really popular, particularly amongst children. Nearly half of children with internet access at home who were aware of social networking, and the vast majority, almost all children, were aware of social networking sites, although they don't necessarily use that term, do have a profile on a social networking site of their definition, although we did give them some guidance on that. And just around a fifth of adults who have internet access have a profile on a social networking site. If we look at this by age, it is predominantly still a young person's activity. 63% of 16 to 19s have a profile on a social networking site. And we'll see when we look at the quantitative children's that there is a crossover where adults we've looked at 16 plus, however in the children's research we're still looking at 16 to 17-year-olds. And across the two pieces of research, the take-up amongst that age group is very similar. 46% of 20 to 24-year-olds who have internet access, and we see a drop-off, particularly amongst over 34s. Although, as you see, there are a small percentage of people older than that who do have a profile on a social networking site. Sorry about this. With children, the relationship is reversed. They're less likely to have them when they're younger. And again, we hit that peak among 16 to 17-year-olds, where this shows 2/3. So bearing in mind, this compares with the 63% we saw on the previous slide amongst 16 to 19s. Over half of 12 to 15s who have internet access have a profile. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen in the media, around a quarter of 8 to 11s have a profile. One thing that we would say about this is that we're not able to say what social networking sites these children have their profile on. And so that would include sites like Club Penguin, which is specifically catered for younger people. It may also include some member communities such as MSN Group, as well as the social networking sites that we tend to refer to, such as MySpace, Facebook, Bebo. no great surprise, the main use of social networking sites is to communicate with people. And this is predominantly people that are familiar. So most adults are communicating either with friends or family that they see a lot, or people that they rarely see. And it's been a great way for people to get in contact with people that they've lost contact with, whether through school or people they've met travelling. And I'm going to show you some verbatims that just give a bit of a flavour to how people talk about the social networking. People are using it to do other things, also, such as looking at other people's web profiles and also downloading music, finding out about musical bands that they're interested in. 17% of adults told us that they have met people or talked to people that they don't know through social networking sites. And this is predominantly 16 to 24s. The 22% of them have actually talked to someone that they don't know. This drops off significantly after that to only 7% of people over the age of 24. We look at children's use of social networking sites, and I haven't shown it on the same graph because the questions were slightly different. Again, communicating with people they know is the main thing that they do, with almost all people saying that they use, children saying they use it to stay in touch with friends or family. Much higher proportions say that they use it to look at other people's profiles or web pages. And then we see just over half saying that they use it to make new friends. Now, this can include people who are friends of friends. It could also include people they don't know, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this doesn't encompass everyone under that category as talking to someone that they haven't met previously or don't have a connection to. So we've got some verbatims just to back up those statistics or to give more of a flavour. So we said they're mainly using it to share personal information with a wide range of friends, and in this context, friends doesn't necessarily mean what would mean in the offline world. It can mean anyone that you have accepted or who's listed on your profile. And so we want to really emphasise, and you'll see this more in the actual report, the emotional benefits that people get from taking part in social networking sites, which we tend to lose sight of a little. And here's just some examples of 20-year-old male saying it's a great way to socialise and they like being the centre of attention. Lots of girls were saying how positive it was to go to school and everyone's talking about what happened on the social networking profile, or the buzz that you get when people comment on your photos or things that you say. For older people particularly, they more likely than younger people obviously to mention rekindling old friendships, and as I said, whether this is from school or people that they travelled with when they were younger. I think we've just decided to concentrate, because it's been an area of a lot of coverage, about talking to people they don't know. And we did get, I think, one or two people in the qualitative research, saying that they had people, they talked to people from across the world and that they had maps on their site so they could see where everyone was. But the vast majority of people who were talking to people they didn't really know, there's a wide range of reasons that could be the case. So we had a few single mums particularly talking about the fact that, once the kids have gone to bed, it's a really nice way of meeting people or talking to people, and they felt that it was safe because they were in their own house, that some of them have replaced using dating sites because now they can use Facebook. And also with a young girl saying that she's moved to a new school and that it was a great way to meet people because you can get familiar with them online before meeting them in reality and in the offline world. And then again looking for people who are, quote, who look fit, and looking through other people's websites and seeing people they like the look of and inviting them to be friends. The next few slides we're going to concentrate on privacy settings. Most people say that they are aware whether their privacy is open or closed, and this is the case for children as well. Very few people, in fact 3% of adults and I think 1% of children said that they didn't know what their privacy settings were. We did see qualitatively, because they tended to be depths or triads, when we got people to go onto their social networking sites. Sometimes they were surprised about what their privacy settings were, but most people at least have an opinion on whether they are open or closed. And this tends to be split between whether their profiles are set to only be seen by friends or to be seen by everyone. And in fact, children are more likely to have closed than adults, with 58% of children saying that their profile is visible only to their friends. Interestingly, and why we've shown parents in the same piece of quantitative research, we spoke to the parents of the children who took part, and the parents were less likely to say that their child's profile was visible to anyone than the children were. And this tends to be not necessarily because they think that their child's profile is only visible to friends, but because they're actually not sure. So you see a relatively similar percentage, 54% say their child's profile is visible only to friends, compared to 58% of the children. Another difference between the parents and children is in the rules that govern the use of social networking sites. And parents are much more likely to say that their kids have rules than the children themselves. And the main reason for this difference in attitude is restrictions around meeting new people, where 30% of parents say that they have rules governing this, as opposed to 13% of children. In comparison, they're very much in line on restrictions of giving out personal details, with around a quarter of both parents and children saying that there are restrictions around this. There are several other rules that we did mention, but they're lower percentages, and it is covered in the social networking report. We've got some qualitative research where we did look at, we started from the basis of whether people thought that there was a problem or any concerns with social networking sites and the way that they're using them. And this covered both adults and children. And I think that the one thing to bear in mind here is that few mentioned anything top of mind. We had to probe quite a bit, because when you see, particularly in the report, that all the emotional benefits that people are getting, that's top of mind, not whether there's any concerns. When we did probe, the types of comments we got was people getting annoyed with other people's self-promotion of themselves, hearing about parties that were organised online, not just through social networking sites, and also people mentioning incidences of online bullying, although we never actually spoke to anybody who had suffered from online bullying. We did talk to a few people who'd perhaps participated in it. When we probed even further and talked to people about the different sorts of things that they might come across, the issues that were raised were leaving privacy settings open as a default, giving out personal sensitive information, posting content, particularly photos that could be damaging to people's reputations. And we did get a few people mentioning this, not necessarily the people who were posting, because we did talk to some people who were posting even what they termed was racy pictures in that, who saw it as fun. It was people that weren't posting these things that thought they could be damaging. And then contact with unknown people. So I've now just got a few verbatims about the reasons why why this wasn't top of mind to them. And in general, there was a lack of awareness of privacy and safety issues in general. They just didn't mention them. They didn't really think about them, particularly in a context with social networking. And I think there were a number of statements around this, but one that really brought it out for me was, how can we come to any harm when we're sitting at home? Nothing bad can really happen. They saw that they were in their house, they weren't out on the street. How could someone get into their house? Someone else said, what are they going to do? Reach down the phone line. So it was that, that sort of lack of recognition or awareness, I guess, of what they could do with those details. There was also the assumption from a few and I'll just stress that this is, this is qualitative. We don't have numbers on this. That privacy and safety issues have been taken care of by the sites themselves. And, someone said they imagine that there is some level of moderation going on, and that they wouldn't let certain types of material be posted. There's also a feeling among younger users that they tended to be invincible, and that they could handle anything that was going to, if something bad did happen. There's also, related to the lack of awareness of privacy and safety issues, low levels of confidence in the ability to manipulate the privacy settings. And this sort of came up particularly when we got them to go on their sites as well. And some of them said, oh, I know how to do this. And then when they actually started doing it, they weren't quite so sure. And as someone said, it seems very difficult to make your profile private. I probably just wouldn't bother. There's also, related to the perception of a lack of anyone being able to get to you. Someone said, what could happen? Nothing bad. It's not like internet banking where they could take my money. And I think that was related to the fact that then they don't see the details that they're giving as particularly damaging in the way that they're not giving their credit card details or their bank account details and that sort of thing. And I guess not making the connection that we've seen with address and school details. And very much meeting people that they didn't know online wasn't really coming up strongly. And for some people, they feel that they've evaluated the risks and they've made a decision that, that they can manage the risks, or that they feel that they've made a decision about setting up their profile that is in a way sort of mitigating their risks. In addition to the qual and quant, and there's a very brief sort of step through the research, we also commissioned a literature review, and I've just got 2 slides overviewing that, and it does back up what we found in our research. The other research that's available, they found that some young people knowingly give away inappropriate, what we deem inappropriate or private information. And we did find this, particularly in the qual, when people were talking about the sorts of content and information that they've got on their sites. However, it seems many people do so inadvertently, and a classic comment that we got in our report was, someone saying they didn't realise that everyone could see pictures of their little girl in the bath that they'd posted for their friends and family to see. And I think that gives a good example of that. And they also found that the research suggests young people may be aware of the risks, but the awareness of these issues hasn't translated into particular action. And something that we found is that the level of benefit and enjoyment and, the emotional benefit they get from it, the buzz of communicating, of getting people commenting on their sites, that they think outweighs the risk, any risks that they may be facing. However, what this all means is that the evidence-based, particularly for increased likelihood of risk or media harm, is patchy and undeveloped. So we know a lot about the theory of what can and could go wrong, but there aren't a lot of numbers of the incidents of this happening. There's also difficulties in measuring it, as I'm sure a lot of you are interested in this area are aware, the ways of defining and also ethical. That means it's quite difficult to record or to measure what is harm, how often it's happening to people. The evidence that does exist points to increased potential for harm online, but again, we don't have the incidents behind this. And the conclusions from the literature review were that research can only guide policy by supporting a judgment based on the balance of probabilities rather than irrefutable proof, of what is happening out there. And it's a very quick run through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll get on straight away and try and keep to time. It's very good when you chair something like this in which you're definitely not an expert, however, to go into the session knowing that you're right with the zeitgeist, because we spent most of the weekend trying to get our 9-year-old daughter unbanned from Club Penguin, from which she had been banned for life for the use of inappropriate language, which she was absolutely adamant had been put onto the network by one of her friends to whom she'd given her identity and password. I'm glad to report that in Club Penguin, justice and democracy is alive and well, and she has been reinstated with a very severe warning that if it happens again, she really will be banned for life. So that's how tough it is at the coalface of social networking for 9-year-olds. Our first speaker is Bill Dutton, director of the Oxford Internet Institute. Bill, give us your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I still have 10 minutes?
You do.
Okay. I don't know about how democratic things are online, but I did feel young knowing that I'm one of the older people that has a profile on Facebook. But when my youngest daughter found out that I had a profile, she said, "That's cool, Dad, but just don't try to link with me." But I'm going to try to. I think the internet, the research of Ofcom is extremely interesting because it connects with a very general question that the OII has been pursuing for some time. I want to try to paint a picture of this, of what I think is the larger theoretical and substantive issue, what's at issue, and some of our general research on that, and then go into a specific project called Me, My Spouse, and the Internet, where we try to look at that in a very specific context. Excuse me if you've seen this chart before. I've been talking about this for about over a decade now. But I think that the primary role of the internet is to reconfigure access. In the broadest sense, the internet and any communication technology reconfigures how we do things, how we communicate with people, how we get information. The profiles change how we get information about other people. But it also changes what we know. What we know about people, who we know, what services we obtain, what technologies we use. This is a very general way of thinking about the internet and its impact. It's very transformative, potentially transformative, but it's not deterministic because, as you can see with profiles, the impact of this depends not just on the strategy of the individual, but the strategy of other actors, the people you're communicating with, parents, so forth. And it's the behavior of different actors will shape who gets access to whom under what conditions and so forth. That's the general research strategy that people need to follow. We did some research with the support of Ofcom and others, Cisco in this room as well, British Library, Talisma, others have supported us over time. The Oxus Internet Survey, I'm going to whiz through these because I only have 10 minutes, but the slides will be online and I'll be able to share all this with you. We interviewed face-to-face people 14 years old and over. We can generalize to Britons, people in England, Wales, and Scotland. We have a 77% response rate in the last year. It's always been a high response rate. I think we have the highest quality data in terms of the range of values. We don't have a large N, but it's not market research. It's trying to get at a wide variety of social, economic, demographic indicators and their role in internet use and impacts. We had about 2,000 participants. Two things I'd just like to illustrate in terms of reconfiguring access. I'd just like to only think about people in terms of how you reconfigure access to individuals. First of all, to underscore the main point made on profiling, most people use the internet to reinforce their relationships with people they know. That is the most common impact, as you communicate with people you already know. But 20% in 2005, 23% in 2007 said they met people online that they did not know before. So it does kindle new relationships. And many people, about half, go on to meet people online, that they met online in person. So you actually move from online relationships to real world relationships. What's very interesting is there's not a very strong demographic deterministic model of who uses the internet to meet new people and who meets people offline. For example, older people, for example, are more likely to meet people in person they meet online than are younger people. But it's mainly shaped by the choices you make about how you use the internet, whether you use, say, put a webcam on, use certain social networking sites, so forth. So it's individual strategies and choices that are more important. We thought that's so important in terms of reconfiguring access that we immediately jumped on the opportunity to work with eHarmony.com, which is an online relationship company in the US that was interested in what's going on in the UK. And we went together with them to survey people in Australia and the UK about their use of the internet. We had 2 questions. One is, if people will people meet people online? And if they do, will be different than the people than they meet in more traditional ways? Because this is, if it shapes reproduction, this is probably the most incredible impact that the internet could possibly have. The other is, in marriage, is the internet a source of problems, or is it actually helping to support relationships in a marital relationship? So we interviewed, we did this, it was an online survey, not a face-to-face field interview. So we've got about 1,000 couples in the UK and fewer couples in Australia, these were online panels, and we tried to find tried to randomly sample married people online. We've adjusted the UK sample to roughly the proportion of that fits the UK online population. We haven't adjusted the Australian sample, but I don't think it would be off by more than a plus or minus 1%, given our experience with the UK data. So we can talk about, do people meet people online who they actually end up married to? First of all, just to say something about the sample. The UK sample is somewhat older on average. They've been married somewhat longer. They have fewer children, but about a quarter, a somewhat larger percentage have children. But they're not worlds apart. These are fairly similar. We also have data that I'll refer to from the US. But I'm not putting the US data up because it's only recently married couples. And I'll refer to that. So I can't, these are not just recently married couples. These are people who are married who are using the internet. Okay, in the UK, we've got about 6% of those people who are married who met their partner online. In Australia, it's 9%. In the US data, if you just look at recently married couples in the US, 19%. Okay, and I want to connect the dots here in a minute, because it doesn't mean that the US is just simply using recently married couples. It could be that there's a trend for more people to use the internet. Who are they in terms of age? If you just look at sheer numbers of people who are meeting their partner online, it tends to be, in both Australia and the UK, it tends to be 26 to 45 years of age. Not the youngest people are the most commonly who have met, but sort of middle-aged. However, if you look at this differently, if you look at the proportion of the age group that met their partner online, the youngest group is the most likely to have met their partner online. Okay, so you look at 19 to 25-year-olds, you've got 21 to 34% in Australia who met their married partner online. So if you connect this with the if you look at the US data on recently married couples, 19% met online, but there's not a big age difference. Okay, so that in fact, the older you are, the slightly more likely that you met online. Okay, so that it could well be that there's a trend for more recently, that people will meet more people online in the coming years. Okay, Where did they meet? This space of flows, the internet, has a number of places in it. The most common are online dating sites, chat rooms, or instant messaging. So those are the three places. In Australia, UK, it's somewhat varied, but online dating sites are somewhat more common in the UK. And also, if you look at the US data on most recently, people who recently married, online dating sites are more prominent. Almost 48% met on an online dating site. And again, online dating sites are relatively new in the UK, and more people are coming to the UK. So that will probably be more prominent. OK, now this is the most significant. OK, will you meet people who you might not otherwise meet? Well, of course, it's very difficult to know that, but two indicators suggest yes, that we will have more diverse relationships online. One is age. These are differences in age. One is age difference less than 6 years. If you met in a traditional way, a friend, at a nightclub or whatever, you're more likely to meet somebody closer to your age. If you met online, you're somewhat more likely to have met somebody that's more than 6 years older or younger than you. More of an age gap in the people who meet online on average. And if you take educational differences, are they similar? Do both not have a college education, or do both have a college education? Or are they different? One has a college education, the other does not, vice versa. You're more likely to have difference in educational background if you met online. So, very interesting. It could very well be that meeting online, you will meet a slightly more diverse array of people than you might otherwise. But what about interests? Okay, importance of attributes. We ask people how important are different attributes: personality, emotional attraction, physical attraction. Maybe people who meet online are less interested in physical attraction. Okay, people online, this is most interesting. Monica pointed this out, is that the people online are more interested in all of these attributes, which is, we don't know exactly how to interpret that, your hypothesis, but it could well be that, who knows, they may be information seekers. They may actually care more about all of these factors and are looking more broadly for people, or they're just inquisitive enough to go online for information about people as well as things. But more, we also ask them what are they interested in. For example, religion, entertainment, community involvement, socializing. People who meet online have more interest in almost all of these things. So they're interested in, so if they have a particular interest, you know, I think many of my staff at the OII want to go online now to meet people. But all these boring people who don't meet online don't have all these interests. Again, these, yeah, get out more. Get out more. Maybe that's why they're so interested in doing these things. But so they're more interesting. Okay, and the final slide to end up is differences in interest. So we created a scale about how similar are their interests of the husband and wife, or different if one's interested in religious activity, the other's not, and so forth. So we have this similarity measure. The couples who met online are more likely to be similar to each other in their interests than the people who met offline. Okay, now this could be that because they meet and discuss things online that they find people of similar interests. Could be strategies of, for example, some online dating sites like Match.com, I think, matches by interest. Other online dating sites like eHarmony.com match by personality, not interest. They're different strategies, and that might actually shape outcomes in terms of the kinds of people you meet. So that's it. We think online networks are extremely important, and in very potentially positive ways, they can reconfigure not only who you know, but who you meet and who you marry. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. I mean, one way of interpreting that data would be to say that in a social networking society, social scientists will be sexually more successful because they will be more accomplished at researching the data and aggregating it and interpreting it.
I'll think about that. That's right.
Okay, let's go to cyber tribes and information warfare. Godfried Williams and Jonas Arreymbi from University of East London.
Good morning once again. Just in case that you cannot tell the difference between me and this gentleman on my left-hand side, I'm Godfried.
I'm Jonas.
He's Jonas. Yeah. Right. Now, cyber-tribalism and information warfare has been an ongoing project between us and the Kinetic Cyber Security National Network, trying to look at the emergence of possible tribes on the internet and the fact that there's a lot of complexity when it comes to understanding what tribes represent, in a sense that tribes can have blood relations or tribes may not have blood relations. So from one culture to another culture, it's quite difficult to understand or give a specific definition of what tribes are. But the main focus of our presentation is to look at the impact of these tribes with respect to security within the social context and communities as a whole. So this presentation will cover two aspects, which is the CyberTribalism and information warfare. Jonas will give an overview of CyberTribalism, whilst I will touch on the information warfare.
Okay. Thank you, Godfrey. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just a quick rundown of what we think cyber tribes are all about. We had Carmen talked about profiling, social networking. All this community, we believe, form tribes on the internet. When our kids log on to the internet, they make friends, they create relationship, they are virtually forming tribes. The same way that modern tribes have been formed in everyday life. What we think they are is they may have common interests in terms of common language, similar belief systems, either in terms of their characteristics or culture, as well as tradition. When these people link together as a social, in social free space, they want to do one thing or the other. Now, we can even relate to incidences that have taken place within our communities, such as terrorism. People now go on the internet to recruit, maybe through religion or through practices. In essence, they are forming tribes. I will show you some example of tribes that we talk about here. Oh, sorry. Okay. As we say, cyber tribes. Sorry, could you? Yeah.
You okay with that?
Yeah, I'll be able to move it
all
from
right,
here.
okay.
Okay. These alliances and associations are formed in free space. They conduct their events, either business, and some of these lead to entrepreneurial skills because, as we keep saying, they are always a step forward than us. So we are always doing the catching up. Okay? Even in terms of security, always the bad guys are moving forward. And we are trying to invent technology to match up with them in order to close the loopholes that they are creating. So what we're going to look at the issues of cyber tribes and how they affect privacy and security. Everybody has talked about profiling, social networking, communicating, but we look at it from a different point of view. Okay? And you see, they have, we're here that they disseminate information, they build relationship, but in this situation, in terms of the virtual community, nobody is responsible for anybody, okay? Because in a physical environment, I know you, you know me. You cover my back, I cover your back, like in a war front. But in a virtual community, I mean, we operate as individuals who don't know each other. How safe are we in that environment? So there's no safeguard and there's no control. This is an example of the tribes that we have in our society, the 12 tribes of Israel. Even within the British island, we have native tribes. Okay? These are the tribes of Britain, or you might call it United Kingdom. In South Africa, we have the Zulu Tribes. Some of these tribes come together because they have this common relationship of their religion or their tradition or their culture. That is how they form. Even the language brings them together. We have the Bobo tribe of Western Burkina Faso in Africa. You see, they have a particular way that they dress, so probably that brings them together as a common people. Now, we want to look at it. We don't like calling it real and virtual. We like to call it the physical and the virtual, because the physical, like what Bill talked here about, is people meeting, interacting one-to-one. But in the virtual community, you interact with many people that you don't know. It's not a one-to-one relationship, it's even a one-to-many relationship that you can create in a virtual community. And in this way, people move around different environments in order to interact. Sometimes people do this with diminished personal interest. Okay? An example is, look at an example of a social networking site like Second Life. It is increasing by the day, by the hour, by the minute. Before coming here, I checked on the site, and I think they had almost 15 million residents. It's almost the population of a country. And they're doing business in virtual space. They're gaming, just socializing, they're downloading music, they're building houses, buying land, all in virtual community. Is that the way forward? We don't know. Most of our research is, is qualitative rather than quantitative, so we have not been able to put some figures in this. We've been looking at this trend for over 3 years now. And where some of these groups from are in news groups, electronic chat rooms, search engines such as Yahoo and Google, and most of them are in subject-based communities like this. This is a subject-based community. You all here are cyber tribes, maybe in the physical world, but these communities, maybe if we leave this room and go out there, we might be interacting online. Some of us will be playing games with each other. Maybe I'll sign up to Bill's website and try to play some games with him to see how we can meet and determine his age and mine. This is a map of cyber tribes. This is a research conducted by UCL recently. They identify them as E-types, which we think are E-tribes. You see the red zones are the clusters where people have access to technology and it is commonly used to interact among themselves. Some of the tribal activities, as most of the speakers have identified, are either for socializing, for communicating. I mean, everybody here has talked about communication. We don't think social networking is all to do with communication. It goes far beyond that. It goes far beyond that. And I mean, some of our research and some of the publications we've made has looked into that issue of how people interact, not only for communication purpose, but for other activities, such as terrorism. So now politicians blog on the internet, They want to pass on their message on the internet, not only for the purpose of communicating, but to create an impact as well. Okay, so these are other examples. We have entertainment where kids, I know Carmen and Helen have talked about downloading issues, putting their photographs on the internet to maybe have the buzz of, look at my photo, do I look as beautiful as you think? All those sort of things. It is increasing the virtual community. And this is what we call the basis that tribes are built on. You see, because when these communities increase, they tend to narrow down to tribes. Some of it is bullying. We now have, there will be a slide where you see now that almost 70% of children within the UK environment have been associated with some kind of bullying in schools. It is now moving from the physical environment to the virtual environment where children use mobile phones to bully their colleagues. In class, they used to maybe wait for you somewhere along the gates and beat you up. Now they text you silly messages to bully you to submission. So some of it has led to very fatal situations where people have committed suicide. In South Korea, there was an incident where one of the stars was bullied or pushed until she hung herself and killed herself. She committed suicide because of the use of the internet to invade her privacy. Okay? Another aspect of social networking, which we think is of prominence, is the issue of economics. Why do people go on the internet to interact? Some to scam people out of their monies, out of their finances. Some launder money, you know. Some go there to steal your identity and my identity, okay? And these are the issues which other speakers have highlighted in terms of privacy, in terms of the sort of profile you expose to the public. I mean, this is a free space. Even though it's a social space, but it is free. Who is policing this space? Is it the government, or is it the service provider, or is it you and me? Now there's some political activities as well that takes place on the social network space. We've had incidences where people's views have been radicalized on the social virtual space. There are through recruitment for maybe one thing or the other, like terrorism. Some use it to confront people. They use some for intimidation. All this lays down to the issue of security. How do we secure this virtual space? For us to be able to interact socially, we need to feel secure in this environment. The physical environment, we know we are safe here because there's a building, there's a door, there's a physical security guard standing out there. Before you come to punch me, I think you have to pass through these guys before you get to me. But in the virtual community, how do we feel safe and secure? In terms of our information, people use different techniques to get our information. They use spoofing techniques, they use spamming, denial of service attacks, which some of the issues that my colleague is going to talk about in his own presentation. And within the social network of virtual communities, pedophiles are using that as a way to lure some of the victims to their so-called net. So, and some of they use this to conceal their activities in terms of the crimes that they commit. As I said earlier, social networking is not only about communication. There are various issues hidden behind why people go to communicate, either because they cannot easily be identified in a virtual environment. We will be looking into some of the techniques that we think might reveal some of their identities when maybe they try to conceal themselves in virtual space.
Getting shorter time.
Yes, sorry.
Right, okay, I think you've just left me with 1 minute, 30 seconds to speak.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry about that.
Right. Now the information warfare. I remember one military officer telling me that, look, every battle is won on the basis of how much information you have, how effective you can use that information, and whether you can deny your adversaries from having any information. So we think that the internet is like an ammunition depot, which is unprotected and accessible by the public. If you happen to live in a military barracks, you find out that your guns at a specific depot, and you only have permission to carry any of those guns if you are an assigned officer.
Either because they cannot easily be identified in a virtual environment. We will be looking into some of the techniques that we think might reveal some of the identities when maybe they try to conceal themselves in virtual space.
Getting short of time.
Yes.
Sorry. Right, okay, I think you've just left me with 1 minute, 30 seconds to speak.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry about that.
Right. Now the information warfare. I remember one military officer telling me that, look, every battle is won on the basis of how much information you have, how effective you can use that information, and whether you can deny your adversaries from having any information. So we think that the internet is like an ammunition depot, which is unprotected and accessible by the public. If you happen to live in a military barracks, you find out that your guns at a specific depot, and you only have permission to carry any of those guns if you are an assigned officer. But in this case, in the virtual world, that is not the case. Everyone have free access to the information depot, which is the military, which is where you have the kind of ammunition that you can use and launch it to your adversaries. I'm not sure whether you
Yes,
pressed
I
it.
just-
Okay.
yes, I did.
All right, thank you. So this is one typical example of information warfare where Pakistan government denied YouTube access in terms of it denied its citizens YouTube access because certain information was publicized on YouTube, which the government considered it to be detrimental or too sensitive or insensitive, depending on the interpretation that one can give it. Another example is bullying. You have these as challenges at the war front, because the context is that the cyber tribes are launching an information warfare, and it's something which is ongoing. And imagine, so bullying has sort of also not been localized within schools, but also you have it migrating to the cyberspace. So the girls that were sexually harassed, wanting terrorism, has sort of also transformed from the streets. And I think, or we believe that from the ongoing research, most of these things have been taking place in the cyberspace and on the internet. Then you have the kidnapping. One example, recently a soldier plotted on net to kidnap young girls for sex or sexual gratification, and that person was trapped and was identified because of the effectiveness of the internet police. Then you have gambling. Recently you have a gentleman, I think I've forgotten the exact name, but he lost £2 million, and he filed a lawsuit against William Hill.
Yeah.
And it's to do with the fact that he felt that William Hill should have denied him access from using these internet gambling facility. So again, you have the war front at different levels. Then you have the information theft or spoofing. I'm not sure how many of us know the implications of somebody stealing your identity online in terms of your IP addressing, or even borrowing your IP address or your machine and using your machine to launch an attack. You can use that to steal information for espionage purposes and also for selling critical business information. Then certain other challenges at the war front. Recently, the Polish information infrastructure, the internet primarily was crippled somehow, and there were accusations of, it was alleged that Russia was behind the sort of crippling of the Polish infrastructure. But that is quite inconclusive. Then you have recently some video that was posted on the internet when President Sarkozy made this comment, "Get lost," because someone tried to shake hands with him, and he tried to shake hands with somebody, and then the person rebuffed the greeting. So that had a very high hit on the internet, and I think that it's had an impact on the popularity and the the level of the way his presidency should be seen in the public domain, and I suspect that, or we suspect that the opponents are taking advantage of that.
We need to wrap up.
Yeah, the other challenges such as malware, defamation, blackmail, espionage, I've already mentioned that, and you have who is winning the war, the combatant with most control on the battleground is winning the war. You have certain battle areas, that is, who is able to have effective control of these battle areas is likely to win the war. This is the information depot, the internet, the network control, the cyber policing and intelligence, social intelligence, understanding behavioral patterns, geo-internet services, intelligent tools, etc. You have certain ways of tracking the cyber tribes. We've made these recommendations as initial outline: personalization techniques, predictive statistical models, subscriber and mass emailing, and cyber language online gamers.
Yeah.
Right. Then you have personalization techniques, the basis of these artificial intelligence techniques. If you're not a very technical person, you might not appreciate them, but the sort of classical methods that are used to interpret three-dimensional data of highly complex data. So these are some of the techniques. And then you have predictive statistical models as well as part of the techniques that can be used in revealing the identities of emerging cyber tribes. You have subscriber and mass emailing networks, which you can use for trend analysis, pattern analysis, volume analysis in terms of how much information is transmitted, who is sending the information across, where the information is being sent to. You have the chat rooms. There's the need for surveillance, regulation, identity verification, which is very difficult to achieve in the cyber world. There's the need to understand the cyber language, and we believe that the way forward with respect to this is by applying intelligent parsers, test summarization techniques, and dictionary analysis as a means of understanding the structure of language, because by understanding the semantics and the syntax and then the lexical structure of the language which is being communicated across, you'll be able to build some kind of profiling and personalize who is on the net. These are the conclusions so far, and as Jonas did mention, this is an exploratory work at the moment and it's still ongoing. Cyber tribe identity techniques and intelligence should focus on personalization tools, tracking mass emailing and SMS systems. There's a need for law enforcement agencies to be concerned with cyber language paradigms, and information warfare, we believe, is tilting in favor of the attackers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tim Davies from Practical Participation is going to talk to us about youth work and social networking.
Yes, I'll just get the presentation. Well, what I want to focus on in this, it should probably say youth work, young people and social networking. What we've been doing in a research project, it's a very practice-based research project over the last 4 months or so, is looking at how young people use particularly social network sites. We're looking at online social networking as an activity, so that's not just MySpace, Facebook, Bebo, and so on, but that's the centre of gravity, particularly in the way policymakers are talking about these sites at the moment. The media is talking about online social networking. So we know a lot of work's been done to look at how are young people using those sites. Some of that we saw earlier. And we know that there are concerns, and we know that there are opportunities in use of social networking by young people. And I'm talking here predominantly about the 13 to 19 age group. And that's quite important because we see a lot of recommendations that talk about children and young people, and those are very different groups. And I've had some conversations already this morning talking about how we need different strategies and different approaches when we're talking about children and adolescents who are going through that process of becoming the adults who might be meeting partners online, might be interacting in many different ways. But we also wanted to look at who is it who supports young people in interacting in their online social networks and their offline, because we don't want to draw a massive distinction that there is the cyber and the offline. The two are very closely linked. So we looked at youth workers, and I don't know how many people are familiar with the youth workforce. I'm going on the wrong PowerPoint presentation here. Go on. So youth work is a professional skill. There's a statutory sector for youth work established in the 1960s by the Arreymbi report. And so the youth workers are distinct from teachers. They're generally employed by local authorities, although the sector is changing rapidly. But they work from a young person-centred model. So youth workers are not there to deliver pre-prepared curriculums, sticking to an educational agenda that's set. They're there to respond to young people, to work from young people's needs through building relationships with the young people in a professional context, identifying needs, and designing programs, interventions, and support to meet them. So youth work is a branch of informal education. It's based on group work, relationship building, and associational work with young people. And its aim is to start where young people are, but move young people beyond that through support and challenge to young people. So very much what we're looking at here is not one of those technical fixes, not one of those big regulation fixes to the concerns people have about young people and social networking, but one of those on the ground working with young people approaches. And just to give you a sense of the size, youth work, we've got about 4,000 full-time youth workers, professional youth workers. We've got 17,000 youth support workers. So this is a profession predominantly made up of part-timers, because that's only 4,000 full-time equivalents. And they're in contact with roughly 30% of local 13 to 19-year-old populations across the country. That varies from area to area. Some areas are spending £30 a head per year on young people in youth work. Others, it's far higher, £100, £200 a head, to give you a sense of that variation. So it's not a uniform picture like schools, but they're in contact with a lot of young people. And the crucial element here is youth work works with excluded young people. We know from a very good youth internet safety survey in the US has found the risk factors, what makes young people most at risk of exploitation, abuse and harm online, is generally them being at risk in other settings as well. It's the young people who have complex social needs, who have been abused in other settings, who are excluded, who are most at risk. Those aren't the young people who are going to be getting educational messages in school. Those aren't the young people whose parents are necessarily equipped and ready to support them getting safety messages. So as much as we need that youth worker there working with these young people who may not be at school, they're working with them on detached work on the streets and so on. So we just set out to explore that. 4 parts to our research. A literature review, which had we realised Ofcom and everyone else were doing such fantastic literature reviews, we probably would have left for 3 months. So I'm not going to present too much of that because most of it's been superseded. A survey online, focus groups, the last of which we're carrying out this evening, and some action research, which is the next phase we're just about to start, working with practitioners to try out, pilot some of the support that we could be delivering and learn from that. So what are the headlines coming out though from the literature? Well, we know lots of young people are using these sites. 49% of 8 to 17-year-olds social networking profiles. We know UK Children Go Online survey found this, which was repeated again in the Byron review. Increasing opportunity for young people online goes hand in hand with increasing risk. If we cut down risk, we cut down opportunity. So we've got to look at how we support young people to navigate risk. So our research question was, what can youth workers do to help young people make the most of the opportunities and navigate the risks of online social networking? Not how can we make young people safe full stop. How do we support young people to be partners in that process and to make the most of opportunities? Because it's crucial that when we look at this, we get a balance between the two. And some research by the Institute of Public Policy Research, which was a bit of a precursor to this research project, both have had involvement of the National Youth Agency, found young people have contradictory attitudes towards safety online. And lots of people get very concerned about that, but we also notice adults and everyone else have a lot of contradictory attitudes to safety online. So we've got to be really critical about our concern and unpack it and think, is it because of the developmental stage young people are at? So what are young people doing online? And we know they're there. Well, here's 6 activities we found looking through the literature, through conversations with young people, that they're up to. Young people are keeping in contact. This is a constantly connected generation. It's not that the conversation online is any different from the conversation that was going on 10 minutes before at the bus stop. It just happens to transition online, onto the social networking site, on the phone, on MSN, multiple platforms of young people keeping in contact with close friendship groups and keeping communication going. Crucially, we've over the years restricted young people going out and keeping in contact in public spaces. Parents don't want their young people to go and hang out in town where they would have been keeping in contact like these girls. They're keeping them at home. So I think Tanya Byron's got the very good phrase that young people will play out their developmental drive to socialise and develop as social individuals online. And that's one of the key things young people are doing. But as part of that, they're sharing content. That could be creative content they've produced. That could be media they're into. It could be, and quite often it's photos and media and videos from shared experiences and events. They're making new contacts, and we've already heard that doesn't necessarily mean strangers. That's friends of friends, that's people they've met once or people they've seen at the bus stop and can now navigate the social network to find them and get in touch and build their social networks, because youth is a period, adolescence is a period of forming social networks offline as well as online, and so that's what young people are using these spaces for. People are hanging out, as I've said, we've restricted people's hanging out in public space. They're hanging out online, exploring identity, and often that gets phrased as identity play or faking identity, but actually it's a lot more of a nuanced picture than that. Young people are trying out aspects of their identity. Adolescents, picture of a bedroom wall there. Young people have always expressed identity through customising their bedrooms, as any parent will probably know. And it's that experimentation with identity that isn't pretending to be someone else, it's working out who you are. This happens now, though, to be playing out on MySpace, Facebook, in social networking spaces. And young people are informally learning in these spaces. There's a lot of informal learning going on, whether it's learning to code HTML so you can update your MySpace page and get it looking the best possible there, or whether it's other forms of learning through interacting with peers, being creative, creating content. The informal learning aspect of this is crucial, and particularly for youth work, which is about young people's informal learning. So our survey, we wanted to find out if all this is going on, if this is affecting massive numbers of young people, are youth workers who are working with 30% of them, do they know anything about it? Are they equipped to support young people engaging with it? What are their needs to effectively support young people in engaging with this? So, first phase was an online survey of 120 youth workers from right across the country, a real spread of senior workers, junior workers, managers, to get a good picture. Some slight selection bias in our sample because it was an online survey, and we've since discovered in focus groups that some youth workers don't even have an email address, so we've got a bit of a struggle in reaching them. But we've got some really good pictures coming out, and we asked people, what are the opportunities you see in social networks for the young people you work with? So we were specifically asking youth workers to think of the groups they work with on a day-to-day basis, what they see the opportunities as being. And a lot came up about increased opportunities for self-expression. Really interesting, though, they see a real opportunity for young people developing a wider range of networks. Now, on other surveys, that might crop up as meeting strangers or making new contacts. Yet this is an opportunity seen in there for young people to broaden their horizons, broaden their social networks, particularly young in quite deprived circumstances, to interact with young people from other areas of the country and other areas of the world. That might be supported and facilitated by professionals, but that's a key opportunity. But one thing that didn't come up strongly is they don't see, at the moment, use of social networking online supporting young people to get involved in real-world positive activities. So there's perhaps a bit of a gap there in how can the offline activity that transitions online take people back into offline positive activities, which the government's doing a lot to support funding-wise at the moment, the offline activities. And what risks did they see, thinking of the groups they work with? Bullying comes out the top there, though I definitely wouldn't put it next to terrorism on a slide. I think they're quite distinct things. Disclosing personal information being a big concern, though interestingly people found it very difficult to connect that to a particular harm that they thought was an issue there. And it comes up in the literature that young people may well be forming a different idea of privacy, and we've got to be aware that our notions of privacy have shifted over the last 100 years and are still continuing to shift. So we must bear in mind, what are we really concerned about in disclosure of personal information? Because the recommendation, don't share any information online, you're not going to get very far talking to anyone and trying to make that as an absolute recommendation, because then you can't use social networks. So it's the nuanced message and getting into that. One of the big concerns, people spending too much time on the computer, young people feeling addicted. Research by the Institute of Public Policy Research had a lot of anecdotal quotes from young people who felt they were spending more time than they wanted to on these sites, so that's a concern there.
Tim, can you wrap up?
Yep, I will. So opportunities, well, youth work is already using these for promotion and recruitment, keeping in contact with the young people they work with. A lot of positive use, but very, very ad hoc. But the most significant finding, 90% of youth workers believe they've got a crucial role in supporting young people to navigate the risk online, and 85% think they've got a crucial role in supporting young people to make the most of the opportunities, but only 42% feel equipped to do it. And when we asked about what measures are already in place to help manage risk, 81% say we're using web filters, 44% think they're effective. Match for match, the most used methods of keeping young people safe online are least believed to be effective by those who are working with young people, which is quite a strong finding. 86% believe giving them better understanding of these tools so they can work with young people, talk to them, would be effective, but 29% have received the training. And shockingly, only 29% have access to social networking sites in their workplace. And if we've gone to focus groups, we were in Rotherham 2 weeks ago, started a session where the 10 youth workers we were with were terrified of social network sites. They've never had an opportunity to see them. 2 hours later, they're saying, great, we need to support young people using this. We need to get the blocks taken off our systems so that we can actively build young people's capacity. Which leads, I think, to the final, where next? We're middle of this research, so we're not at the end. We can't make fixed recommendations. We're learning as we go by trying things out. But what's definitely coming up, we need more resources and training for the informal education sector to explore this and understand this, and to pick up some of those examples of good practice. Youth work's been asking us for a lot of those. But most crucially, it needs to be a focus on capacity building first. Those youth workers whose internet access is blocked, they can't access these sites. They can't do resource building training for young people to use them safely. We've got to shift that round, switch around Byron's recommendations the other way to say, let's build capacity first, and then let's use blocking and security measures to fill the gaps in that. And we need to always have the developmental stage of young people in mind when we're thinking about these technologies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tim. Rebekkah, Willet, is Denise Carter here? No, fine. Rebekkah, a response from you to the not insignificant diversity of what you've
Yes, exactly.
what's been covered this morning.
Yes, this is quite a difficult job. So I've tried to pull out 3 points that hopefully encompass the very diverse presentations we've heard. And I think the first one, which makes sense, is the importance of specificity. So each of the presentations has presented very different uses of social networking sites and very different definitions of social networking sites. I have to confess now, I work at the Institute of Education, so one of my focuses is on education. I am doing a pilot study, which it's a never-ending pilot study, because the more questions we ask of young people, the more questions we have. So we've now interviewed 23 young people, just ages 14 to 16, who, and of those 23, 17 are Bebo users. So we are really honing in on the specificity of 14 to 16-year-olds on Bebo and seeing very specific uses of Bebo. So these 14 and 16-year-olds say that Bebo is marketed to them. There are reasons that they are on Bebo, and it's partly because of their age. They see Bebo as for young teenagers. And they draw in all these discourses about childhood and adolescence to situate themselves as very specific users of Bebo. They also list technical constraints, or technical affordances, actually, not constraints, of Bebo. They like to change their skins, their kind of background images, daily. They like to post photos daily. And Bebo allows that very easily, much more easy than MySpace, which the MySpace users we did talk to have different motivations for using MySpace. It's more technical. They use it for different purposes. So there are very specific reasons for particular ages being on particular sites. And I think it's misleading then to talk about social networking sites or systems in a very broad way. There are problems with that. So I think it's misleading to talk about your daughter on Club Penguin next to a 40-year-old in a news group, for example. There are interesting questions about media and about the role, about what is it about the internet and about this form of the internet that is, as Bill said, is changing what we know. But I think the importance of specificity really needs to be focused on here. I think, in terms of Godfried and Jonas's presentation, that I would like to know more about these tribes. So is it? I do agree that in the studies we've gone into schools, and we have found, as the Ofcom report said, that social networking sites are what we are kind of toying with is how they're amplifying existing social relations. So the teenagers that we're talking to don't talk to people that they don't know. They are in there because, and that's the other thing with Bebo, they're in there because they want to talk to friends that they see every day at school or relatives. So, and in a way, this is a concern that this is amplifying existing social relations. So they also said people who don't have friends offline will not have friends online, or what they would call real friends versus their friends in their friends lists. So it is a concern, but I'm interested then about, again, being more specific. So who, in terms of kind of age, gender, ethnicity, et cetera, crosses those tribal boundaries? That's a really interesting question, I think. So under what conditions can those boundary lines be crossed? So the one person we did talk to who managed to cross those lines was a fan of a particular West End production. And she goes to this West End production to fan gatherings of this West End production and meets people and then chats with them online. So that's one example of particular circumstances under which tribal boundaries can be crossed. So I think, kind of thinking more about the circumstances and the specific role in media of either enforcing those boundaries or stretching those boundaries, as Bill's presentation showed, quite conflicting data here. So Bill's proposing that actually there are some boundaries that are being stretched. So I think there are kind of questions about, the specificity of Bill's population as well, and the kinds of sites that Bill is looking at as well are very different. Okay. The second question I have is more of from my role as a researcher, is how to research these things. We've looked at, one of the reasons our pilot is never ending is that we interviewed kids, and then we got their permission to look on their social networking sites, and we had two completely different pictures here. And so we had to then go and have individual interviews where we talk about what's on their site. And it's a very complex process of trying to analyze these different pictures that they're presenting to us. But also, I think this raises interesting ethical questions about how we're interpreting what we're seeing online. So I think in the Ofcom report, one of the things was, one of the categories was attention seekers. This was an absolute no-no for 14 to 16-year-olds. You do not put things on there to seek attention. They know that, you know, and so, but their interpretation of attention seeking and my interpretation of attention seeking is very different. Their presentation of self in terms of their sexualized selves is quite, well, it was an eye-opener to us, let's say, to myself and Jessica Ringrose, who do research on gender issues. And so we really did have to ask them for their interpretation of what a sexualized image is online. So there are kind of ethical issues about how we're interpreting these things. And then I think also questions about, you know, the kinds of statements that we can make. I mean, again, I confess I'm a qualitative researcher, and I do envy, you know, reports that make statements and convincing statements. But again, I really wonder about making these statements given the complexities that we're finding when we look at different kinds of data. So I think the third question then is about how we're presenting ourselves and how we read presentations of self. So Bill talked about individual strategies, which kind of relates back to my first point about being specific, that people have individual strategies online. And so there is a variety of information that they are gaining through a variety of modes of communication. And that's one thing that Bill's point brought out as well. When we've talked to young people, it's impossible to talk to them just about the social networking site because they are also at the same time doing their coursework online. They have their instant messaging service open online. They have their mobile phone next to them, their text messaging, and these are the same people that they're seeing every day in school. So there's obviously a whole range of modes of communication, and they're presenting themselves differently in these different spaces. And social networking sites, to the young people that we met, are the most the most performative in a way. They are, if you want to really chat to someone, if you want to really get to know someone, you talk to them face to face or you talk to them on the phone. You know, if you have a conflict that needs resolving, there's no way you're going to do it in an open space, even if it's a private space of a social networking site for these 14 to 16-year-olds that we talked about, that we talked to. So I think there are questions about how, again, how we're interpreting social networking sites as presentations of self, but also then how we think about media literacy, which comes over to Tim's point. So young people are clearly reading interpretations in particular ways and are very media literate at reading interpretations. In a way, maybe we need to be more media literate in reading these sites, but maybe these are private spaces that actually they do have a right to be private. But I think there are kind of questions I have, again, about kind of the structures that are determining how they're presenting themselves. So the number of hits that people have, the number of friends that people have, these are all kind of commodified ways of them measuring themselves and presenting themselves. And there are questions we might want to ask about this. But I think, you know, there are bigger questions about how we're reading this and how they're reading this and how we can help them then read these images and these kinds of interactions, as well as, you know, thinking about the standard discourses around risks. And I guess I kind of want to close with an anecdote that I mean, the kind of risk-benefit is a real challenge, I think, to educators. And I work with teachers who are generally media studies teachers, but they get social networking into the curriculum partly through media studies, but partly through PSHE lessons. And I attended a PSHE lesson recently, and they were making brochures for parents or non-social networking users on, you know, what social networking sites are, what they need to know about them. And a child wrote, your parents should always know what you're doing on your social networking site. So we asked him, you know, are you serious? Do you want your parents to know what you're doing on your social networking site? And he said, well, no. But I think that the conflict that we have around media literacy is is how to discuss these risks and how to kind of move on to different kinds of media literacy questions, which are about how we're reading interpretations and how we are thinking about how others are reading our presentations of self online.